Welcome back, everyone, to the. Start that again. Oh, you got the book there. How cool is that? Oh, that's nice.
Well, that's
Hi,
what you're
everyone.
laughing
Welcome
at.
back. Oh, God, I was starting again. Damn it, Ali. All right, ready? Hi, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of the Vinh and Ali Show, where this is part 2 of us talking about Naval Ravikant's book. And we are excited to get into part 2 because yesterday I had a very exciting lunch to get to, hence why we had to end the podcast. So sorry about that, Ali. The lunch
How
was
was
very
lunch?
exciting. It
Yeah.
was fantastic.
Delicious?
Like I said to you, yeah, we had congee, then we had spare ribs on the side, then we had a bit of chili bamboo shoots, then we also had pickled cucumber, and then it was eggs and noodles and this really nice fermented. Oh, it's just it was just brilliant, absolutely brilliant. Congee with many condiments and many different dishes. It's the way to go.
Well, thanks for that. Now I won't be able to concentrate on this podcast because I'm just hungry now.
No worries, Ali. Well, I mean, yesterday, look, where we left it off was we were talking about the importance of fun, right? The importance of having fun. We're talking about specific knowledge and how all of that kind of came together and you being able to be as unique as you can. And I guess the next part that I had in my notes, and I guess we can go on from here, is the whole idea of productizing yourself. And how Naval talks about you need to productize yourself because once you productize yourself, you can scale it. And then that way you can add lots of value to the world and you're able to build wealth and, bring in higher levels of financial reward, etc. What were your thoughts on the whole productizing yourself? I mean, I think for me, I've productized myself, but it's not scalable yet until I build this online course that I'm building. Because I productize myself in the sense as a keynote speaker, as a magician, as a virtual keynote speaker, I've been able to productize myself.
I think we all are essentially productized to some level where regardless of whether you're working in a role or you're a thought leader like yourself, you're an owner of a business, it doesn't really matter, a parent. Yeah, we've all got this brand that probably inherently exists. Whereas I think there's some people commercialize that and then others don't. And what I mean by that is that
I was just going to quickly ask you, do you feel like, because this is productize yourself, do you feel like Future Golf, the business you've built, is that you productizing yourself? I mean, doesn't it have to be you? That's the thing that's being productized? Or do you think it can be your idea that you've productized?
Yeah, it's such a gray area. I think it's a bit of both. Like if I look at, like say even yourself, right? Like you've got Vinh, Giang, the brand, but then you have a team, you have a videographer, you have a manager, you have a strategist, you have a family at home. So it's like, yeah, you are the end product there, but you know what I mean? Like there's so many things that are taking place around that. So if I look at it as, say, if it was me as founder and CEO, if it was just me doing that, the product would be nothing because it never would have materialized into anything. But it needed...
Well, because you're not that skillful and you have not a lot of value to offer.
Well, I just don't believe that there's any such thing as a self-made, people like I'm a self-made entrepreneur or I'm a self-made athlete.
So
it's like, if you manage to do that all by yourself and you've only productized yourself, that's genius.
Well, wait a second. If you're truly self-made, that means you conceived yourself. That means you didn't even need the assistance of mum and dad to conceive you. You were just conceived out of thin air. That would bloody be amazing.
But I think going back to your point, it's more around like I look at it more as what's your brand. And then I do like the concept of thinking of yourself as a product because then you're really thinking about, well, if brand is, this is who I am and this is the high level perspective of what it is that I'm doing, then I think productizing yourself, you can start thinking about it from the lens of, well, what are my features? What are my actual skills? What's the value that I then bring? And
let me color this in. Yeah, let me just color this in a little bit more. And so sorry to butt in, Ali, but I want to color this in a little bit more so people will have a lot of context, right? So the whole idea behind productizing yourself has uniqueness. Productize has leverage. Yourself has accountability. Productize has specific knowledge. yourself has specific knowledge in there. So this is kind of productizing yourself is putting all of that together. And then that's why when I read this part, I kept thinking, oh, it's productize yourself, meaning that you've got, I mean, I read it in the most literal sense, and I guess in a way that's most relevant to me right now, is that I can turn myself into a product by creating an online course. Because all of a sudden, if I create that online course, I've turned myself into a product that's highly scalable now that I can put out there into the world. Whereas I was failing to think of it in the sense of what you were doing, but you're right. You managed to productize yourself too, because you productize a passion that you had. You know, you love golf. You wanted to introduce golf to the younger generations. You kind of productize that, turn that into a business. And now that's you almost in a part of you in product form.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, I think when you look at things like what you're doing with the online course, when people have a blog, when people have books, I think he talks about writing code. There's also that perspective of a product essentially being something that works for you while you're not actively doing something as well. So you've got leverage. And I know he's very big on leverage and compound interest off that leverage. So I think, again, just putting another little bow on it, it's around what are things that you can do that keep growing and keep having an impact, even while you're not necessarily actively doing those things. Whereas, say if you're working in a role, are you able to then leverage your IP or what you're doing within that role? Or is it, like, do you get a share off that? Do you get a bonus for it? Like, is it just, like a salary is a form of productizing yourself. It's probably the most basic form.
It's also most likely the most ineffective form, right? Because that is where you're still trading time for money often most of the time.
Yeah.
Whereas the reason why this really intrigued me is because it's kind of aligned with what I'm currently doing. And it's that I haven't been able to escape the trading time for money game. Because even when I'm doing virtual events, even if there's, I did a virtual event last year for QuickBooks that had, 36,000 people join that virtual keynote, which was cool because the virtual space allows me to scale how many people that I serve. However, I still have to be active at 4 a.m. in the morning when I was serving my client in the US to do that virtual keynote. Whereas the reason why this stood out to me so much was that, we live in a world now where Naval also says in the book, he talks about the new rich, and he talks about the new rich are going to be that generation that leverages code, that leverages servers and machines that are working away while you sleep. And that all kind of connected to me as being the online course, because now when I create the online course, I productize myself, my knowledge, my content, put it into a course, charge whatever I want for it, whatever amount. And then that online course is living on the Kajabi platform, on their servers, on their computers, and that's working 24/7 for me now. So I really looked at it from that point of view, and I wondered how other people could apply it who are not thought leaders. Or does everyone need to somehow productize their content into an online course and then leverage it in that way? I was trying to think of it, and I guess I want us to talk about this, is that how can other people apply this? The whole idea of productizing themselves.
There's different ways, because I think if it's about expertise, one of the ways, I can't remember what book it was in, but it's that whole concept of get something that you're interested in and then just learn more than 90% of that area. And you could, I know Naval speaks about this in the book too, but he writes about being on the bleeding edge of trends and that being really important. So say right now, just a practical example would be is if you believe that cryptocurrency is going to be a big thing, you could probably quite quickly get an information advantage just by studying that, because so many people don't yet know about what cryptocurrency is, what the underlying tech is behind that. Where you invest maybe 20, 30, 40 hours and you're potentially in the top 2 to 3% of people with that knowledge. You can then become an expert, and you're seeing it already happening. There's YouTubers with 200,000-300,000 followers that are now essentially getting early investment into these altcoins and cryptocurrencies, and then they're able to essentially control the price to some extent with their following and their basis. So that's just one example. I saw it happening when social media kicked off 2006, 2007. People that learnt the Facebook ads system were able to productize something new. So that's another way where you can quite quickly become an expert, and you probably already have areas of expertise, whether you're working in an environment, like one of my friends I know does like resume writing and has been in the corporate world for years and sees a lot of grads coming through. And then she just helps people that are looking to get into, say, higher education and helps them with their resumes. And that's now a product that can then be sold. So it's a cool thing to look at around what areas of your expertise can you productize.
It was a kind of chapter in the book where it helped me realize the missing piece of the puzzle for me when I was creating content. So I started creating content since 2013, 2012. And I started putting a lot of content on social media, LinkedIn, Facebook, YouTube. And even as I was growing my following base, what I realized, and it took me bloody 5, 6, 7 years to realize this, was that sure, I was building a group of followers, but I really had nothing to offer them in terms of value. I mean, I also didn't have a product for them to buy. So even though I built all this social currency and people started to trust me and really like my brand, I didn't have anything for them to buy because I didn't productize myself. So it was the missing piece of the puzzle now, because now I can create an online course where it's something I truly love and truly am good at teaching. Now I've productized myself. So as I build content in the future, which I'll start again in a couple of months, now people have something they can buy if they want to. Now they don't have to buy it, but they can if they want to. And to me, if I productized myself, 6, 7 years ago, I think I would have created a whole different stream of revenue that, I didn't get to experience or enjoy because I didn't productize myself. So this was a really cool nugget for me, because now I'm in the mindset of every time I do something, can I productize this in any way? And, you don't want to overly do it. So you sell everything, this is how Vin does laundry, like that doesn't really matter. But it's just, I'm probably going to create that course now just to sell it. It will be the most epic laundry course you've ever done. Oh, I can't hear you, Ali. For some reason I can't hear you. This is, oh, you muted yourself somehow. Now it says your mic isn't connected. This is live podcasting for you as you experience.
There we go. We're back.
There you go. He's back.
Yeah. Just checked out for a little bit. You got me hungry at the start of the episode, so I was just cooking.
The sad part is that it didn't capture you laughing at that terrible joke of mine. So now people are just going to think I was completely lame. But that's okay.
Well, we'll put in some canned laughter. It's okay.
Yeah, we will. Well, I mean, I guess that's the main value I got from that. And I really liked your spin on the whole productizing yourself as well, is that, the example of the cryptocurrency world and the YouTubers, that's an amazing way that they've been able to productize themselves. And I've seen them. I've watched a few of their videos, and, they have Patreons that you can join and be a part of. So they've productized their highly specialized knowledge and they share it in the Patreon groups. So that's a really cool way looking forward is, if you're new to this whole productizing yourself, brainstorm a couple of ideas, because again, often people have that brain freeze where they go, oh, I'm not unique. I don't have any specific knowledge. Chances are you do. You just haven't sat down. You haven't had to sit down and had a really good think about it.
Yeah. And it can be anything, especially in today's world. It can be so niche. Like one of my good friends, he does like tropical fish and like fishscapes and landscapes in fish tanks. And that has a massive following because people are into that. So it doesn't matter what your interest is. There will be a tribe out there that will be interested in it. Like, it was the same when we started doing golf. Seven years ago, everyone was like, young people just won't play golf. They're not into it. The average age of a golfer is 60 years old. But we knew that wasn't true because there was other people in our age group that were playing. Yeah, maybe there wasn't as many as the over 60 age group, but there was definitely enough there. And then it builds up. And if you have that niche, you actually end up with potentially one of the larger and more engaged followings because you're serving that one group. And then it also attracts others that are like, oh, well, I'm young. I might want to get into it. Or, yeah, I remember having fish when I was a kid, so I wouldn't mind getting back into that. Like Lego, I love building Lego right now. Like you could probably do YouTube videos on building Lego and just streaming the build. Like, there's all these things that people will watch and potentially engage with. Might only be 1 or 2 people, but if you can build that out.
Well, it's an extra potential stream of revenue that you wouldn't have had otherwise, right? I mean, it's kind of like yourself, right? I mean, one of the areas that you have specific knowledge in is taking an idea that you have and then turning it into reality. And then you created that small online course of yours as well. And now you've got a bunch of people who have joined it and checked it out. And I noticed you did a bit of a shout out for it on LinkedIn the other day, which was really
Yeah.
cool. You know, now all of a
Yeah.
sudden you've been able to take all that knowledge that has taken you the last 30 years for you to learn, package it inside a small course, and now you can give that to someone, even if you don't charge any money for it, for example. That
Sure.
now is a way for you to productize yourself and build massive reciprocity with someone, and you can do it at scale. Whereas imagine you had to sit down, have a 7-hour conversation with every single entrepreneur that wanted to learn the art of entrepreneurship. You you
Yeah.
can't scale that. Now you can scale giving value. You know, now you can scale that, which is absolutely amazing, because the whole concept of reciprocity is very powerful as well.
For sure. And I think that's the other thing when you get to the point where, say, I think a lot of the times businesses are viewed from a commercial lens in terms of being successful. And I've always been a fan of going into projects more with a passion-based perspective, where it's like, all right, well, I've got, like, say, even when I was working full time, I'm like, that's my security blanket. That's where I get my salary. That's where the bread gets buttered. My family gets looked after. It sorts that out. And when I started the business, it was never really from a commercial perspective that for this to keep going, it needs to be commercially successful. It was more just, well, is this fun? Are we learning? And that was always my theory behind it too, is, well, this will be the business where we learn about business, and then we'll go start a proper business after it. But as it happens, when you're passionate, you really love something, you just keep getting drawn back to that. And everything that I tried to start that was more commercially driven, it generally didn't last for that long, because I'd lose interest or I'd get bored with it. Whereas the things that I was really passionate about is that. And I think that's the same with what we're doing with this podcast, with the courses you're releasing, some of the stuff that I'm releasing. It's now more around how can we hopefully impact people with knowledge we've acquired and keep sharing it as we learn it. I think there's something really special in that from a fulfillment perspective.
It's why Naval has actually a quote that he says too, where he says, if you don't know yet what you, no, sorry, let me say it again. If you don't know yet what you should work on, the most important thing is to figure that out. And then he continues with, you should not grind at a lot of hard work until you figure out what you should be working on. I think that's such a cool little line that he kind of wrote, because it just speaks to the importance of finding what it is that you really enjoy. And I'm, what's cool is, we've been able to now connect many different books together. And if we go all the way back to the early episodes of the Cal Newport book, Be So Good They Can't Ignore You, combining the concept of you can't love something till you get good at it. Sometimes you can. However, generally what happens is we work hard at something, we become skillful at it, and then once we're good at it, people praise us for the work that we do. Then we start to build the love for what we're doing. So instead of follow your passions, it's follow hard work, and then your hard work turns into your passion. And like that topic kind of keeps coming back. I find that it kind of comes back time and time again through different episodes. Have you started to been able to bake up some kind of thought now in your head about which way it truly is? I mean, is it one way or the other, or is it the conclusion that we always come to? Is it really both? Some people are born with this innate passion. Some people have to work hard at it. Then it becomes a passion.
Yeah. Unfortunately, it's the boring answer on this one, I think. It is. It's
both.
Yeah. Because I'm probably the opposite. I feel like the better I get at something, after a while, if I've conceptualized everything that's involved with it, say from a learning perspective or an action perspective, I'll probably lose a little bit of interest in it, just because now it feels like it's nearly like the laws of diminishing returns, where the growth doesn't feel that exponential. So then it will actually lose me a little bit, but I'll still stay in it because there's obviously a level of love for it. But I think with you, just from speaking to you, I know you say that you end up loving things more the deeper you go into them. You've got that more mastery type of focus, whereas I love probably generalizing and then dabbling in a variety of different things and then combining them for like there's a book called Range. I don't know if you've read that. It's an awesome one
No.
if you're not a specialist and you're somebody that feels like you get distracted easy and you dabble in a lot of different things. But the book's really based around looking at a lot of generalists throughout time and then seeing how they combine a variety of different skills and collate those into then turning that into expertise.
You know what's kind of crazy? You just helped me realize something about myself. In that, because I work hard at something, get good at it, then fall in love with it, on my side of things, it's very difficult for me to try new things. That's one of the reasons why I keep doing the things I do and try to get better at those. Because for me, that's easier than trying something new and being bad at that thing that I'm trying. It's why, we went out for that quick golf game the other day where it's not even a golf game. You took me to the driving range. And since that day, I've never gone back. It's because once I'm good at something, I think I get comfortable with the fact that I'm good at it. I like that praise when I do that thing that I'm really good at. Because when I do that thing I'm really good at, lots of praise come in, lots of love come in. Whereas when I'm doing something new and I don't get the praise, I'm kind of like, see, that's why you don't do anything new. It's why I don't even play new games. It's why I keep going back to the old games, the classics that I love. It's because I'm addicted to that high performance, which is only achievable with things you're familiar with. So it's interesting, an interesting danger that I have to look out for.
Yeah. But I think there'd be a lot of people on the other side wishing that they could get that deep into something like you often do too. So it's again just knowing what you're about as an individual. Like say, for example, you look at somebody like LeBron James, where basketball is just life. I'm pretty sure he's probably not that, he probably hasn't gone deep into that many other things, but looks like he's pretty happy becoming the greatest or one of the greatest of all time in his field.
So I feel like, see, that's what's really interesting about human beings, right? You're one thing and then you wish you were the other. You're probably more of a generalist than you probably wish you were more of a specialist. I'm a bit more of a specialist and then I kind of go, I should be more of a generalist. Yeah. And what that makes me think, right, is that in life there are generalists and there are specialists, and it's okay for you to be one or the other. You don't have to be both, because in this case, maybe being both makes it worse for you, makes this whole experience of life worse, because it's like those people who are, I've got friends who are working in a 9 to 5, and then to them, they have pain in their heart because they're thinking, but I want to run my own business. I want to be an entrepreneur. But from looking from the outside in, I go, I'm not sure if that's right for you, because if you try that, you may not like it, because some of them jumped ship, tried entrepreneurship, worst thing they've ever done in their life. They hated it. So I think there is danger in trying to be both sometimes with certain things. You've got to be careful with that.
Yeah, just one of the lines that stood out for me in the book, just as you were saying that, was it was around decision making, and it was, if you're undecided on a decision, generally the answer is no. And I think just from speaking to so many people, because so many people in our circle, they're looking at growing and developing themselves and trying different things. And every time I've done a review with people that I know in my life and we have a look at where things are at, generally speaking, 80% of the things that are happening in your life, you've probably designed and are actually pretty aligned to who you are. But then there's maybe 10 to 20% that you need to optimize a little bit. Like very rarely do you meet somebody, especially say in their 30s or 40s, where they're like, every single decision that I've made up to this point has been incorrect. And I'm completely on the opposite side of where I want it to be. It might feel like that, but when you actually break it down, it's like, well, yeah, what did you learn about? What did you study? Where did you work? Who did you work with? Who are the types of people in your life? They usually wouldn't change all of it. like there isn't. So I think that's another thing where it's really important when people do then go on Instagram and they see people and they're like, blah, 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 started a business. I better go start a business. It's like, well, I think that concept of looking internally and being like, well, do you want the stress of running your own business? Do you want to work the long hours? Do you want the levels of responsibility? Do you want to deal with legal and finance and hiring and firing and all of these other things? Or do you just want to go to work and tools down at 5 and then spend time with your family? Like, I think that's where that self-exploration and looking internally is just so important. especially nowadays
Well, it's-
because there's so many options available.
I love that you bring that up because, you know, I think I've got some cousins and even my wife fall victim to this sometimes where, you know, they go on Instagram and then you're following all these really pretty models and everything. And then, you know, inevitably you compare yourself to them and everything. And I hate it when she does that because it just makes her feel shit. And I'm like, why should you feel shit? You shouldn't, like, why are we comparing ourselves to these people? And I love that this book gave us that nugget of the comparison thing because then I remember asking her, and I think Naval used this example in the book as well, where it's like, you know, if you want that to look like that person, and I was saying this to my cousin and my wife and stuff was all there. I said to them, if you want to be that person, you have to take all of their lives, in their entire life. You have to give up your husbands. You have to take their husband, which in this case, they probably were like, yeah, actually, we're down with the trade. Because they're probably like all ripped and, you know, epic and everything. Yeah. But not only that, I said, well, you have to take their families. You have to take the in-laws there. You have to take the potential anxiety that they feel from the hate they get on social media. You have to deal with the pressures that they feel from always not being able to eat what you want. You know, you always have to follow the strict regime of diet and exercise, and maybe they're even bulimic on the inside. I don't know, massive assumption here, but maybe you have to take all of that and all the demons that come with that. And then when you kind of say it in that way, in the end, you know, they don't want that. We don't want to take on everything that the other person takes on. So the comparison thing is a deadly trap that when you fully understand the full weight of it, sure, if you want that, then you have to take all of it. Yeah. Generally, people don't want to take all of it.
Mm-hmm. It's true. And
yeah,
we've spoken about this a few times. If there was the perfect human and the perfect way to live, there's 8 billion people, 7 billion people on the planet right now. You'd assume 6 billion people would be living that way, right? Yeah. At least. But we don't do that. We all live, even though we're all genetically so similar, we all live quite uniquely. We do different jobs. We have different personality traits. We have different interests and different values and different beliefs and culture and all of these bits and pieces. Like, surely if there was a proper way to do it, by now we would have figured it out. And like even on things like diet, there's no consensus. Like some people are like, I only eat meat. Some people are like, I'll never eat any meat. I'm purely plant-based. I'm like, I'm juice-based. I'm like 30% vegetable and 20% fruit. It's like there's not even a consensus there. Like body's a machine essentially. There should just be a few different ways to fuel it and a simplicity there. But I think that's where we're so unique as a species.
And I think that's why all of us need to go on our own journey and become a perpetual learner, right? It's the more you learn, the more you can build that self-awareness and you can start to compare, so this person did it like this. I tried it the way they did it, didn't work. However, 30% of what they tried worked for me. I'll keep the 30%, I'll leave the 70%. You learn some more new information. You know, I tried copying that as well. Doesn't work. I emulated it. Doesn't work, but I can take 10% from this person. And I think that's why being a perpetual learner helps you gradually be able to put the pieces of the puzzle together and go, oh, I'm 6.3% that, I'm 7% this. And then I think that's kind of the goal in life, right? Because if we're only going through life with the foundational base knowledge of what we currently know, you can't solve problems. You know, you can't solve problems with old thinking. You have to continually add to that knowledge base so that you can bring in new pieces of the puzzle to go, oh, does that fit? Does that fit? Does that fit? Whereas I feel like, I mean, I can remember the reason why high school was such a terrible experience for me was because I wasn't a perpetual learner. I wasn't a learner during high school. All I learned was, you know, how to do calculus and fractions and physics, but I never learned about things in life, personal development. And the reason, again, it was so confusing was because I didn't have personal development pieces of the puzzle. I was learning about freaking fractions and physics and chemistry and biology and trying to use that knowledge to solve this weird experience that I was going through called puberty. I wish they taught me how to calibrate my own mind and how to get rid of sexual frustration as opposed to just bloody sexually. Are you sexually frustrated? Let's learn some calculus. You know, it didn't make sense.
Like, why isn't this equation solving my puberty? It's like
well, exactly right. You know, they didn't teach us how to manage our emotions, manage stress, manage heartbreak. So to me, that's a clear example of how, with not much knowledge at that time, without learning during those early adolescent years, we need to be more conscious of that going into our adult years. That you look at our teenage years, how crazy that was. Our adult years, to me, it's even more crazy. So if you're not being a perpetual learner and continually learning, you're setting yourself up for a trap. Yeah, I mean, it's a terrible thing. Go ahead, you go.
Yeah, no, I just love that point that you made about how we look at one individual person and we're like, I want their life, or I want to be who they are. So just as a practical takeaway, there's something so valuable in that, is that it's great to have people that inspire you and that you want to emulate, but just picking maybe one aspect of it rather than trying to internalize their whole life and wanting to replicate that person's existence, that's probably a trap. But if you can then look at someone and be like, oh, I like how they're fit, at least that's one thing. And then maybe researching, all right, well, what's their body routine? Like, well, what do they do exercise wise or nutrition wise? But then parking that separately and depersonalizing it from everything else that they're posting on Instagram, whether it's the holidays and the jets and that image that's being portrayed, because that's probably where it gets a little bit dangerous, because generally the two aren't linked.
Yeah, look, you're right. You're right. And it's being comfortable that you can take a little from each person. You don't have to take the entire thing. I think that's something that we all have to learn as well. Because before, when I used to emulate people, I used to emulate completely. You know, the classic example of me was, Gary Vaynerchuk, when I first discovered him. And Gary Vaynerchuk, early in his career, I felt like, he's gone through an awesome transition, in his career as well. Initially, it was all about hard work, and it was about, sacrifices that you've got to make, sacrificing this and that. And then I kind of just went, oh, okay, then I'm going to sacrifice everything. I'm just going to work this hard. And he had all these videos. Even the way I started producing videos started to emulate him. I wanted to highlight how hard I was going, how little sleep I was getting, how I was on the plane all the time. And it's dangerous, because just don't be afraid to take the good and leave the bad. And good and bad is so subjective, right? It's so subjective. So what's good for you, some other people might like. Some people might love that. But don't be afraid to take some of the good and leave some of the bad. It's okay. You don't have to take the whole thing.
And it just goes back to, I think, in a lot of spiritual teachings as well, where for a lot of us, there's some great quotes, and so many books go to this point, that the answer lies within us. We've just got to go and find it. And I think that's what books like this really do quite well, is that they're not telling you what to go and do or saying that this is the way that you should live. Like, it's like a practical type of biography, where it's one person saying, these are the mental models I use. These are the approaches that I use. This is how I make decisions. These are the things that I'm reading. These are some of the beliefs that I have. These are some of my viewpoints on, like, money and happiness. And it's like, well, this is what I've tried and tested, and this is what happened for me. And if it resonates with you, maybe you go give it a go. And I think that's what hopefully we're doing with this podcast as well, is that we're just sharing things that we've tried and tested as we learn and fail and explore new things. But that's kind of the journey, I think, is if you keep trying different things and finding what resonates with you, that's where the answers will lie. But the tricky thing is finding the time and the space to actually get to know yourself, and to sit down and ask yourself the tough questions, and to figure that out. I think that's something where it's worth scheduling that in, going to a cafe for a couple of hours and writing to yourself and saying, all right, well, where am I? What am I about? What's annoying me? What do I want to improve? What am I curious about?
You really have to pay attention if you want to get to know yourself. And it's getting harder and harder for all of us to start paying attention to life, because, again, life is so fleeting, right? And again, because of the distractions that we talked about, whether it be social media, your phone, games, TV, whatever it may be, life is so distracting that it's so hard to pay attention to yourself. An example I can give everyone as well is that it took, I can't believe this. I've been creating short films, videos, and everything since I was in my late teens. I love creating stuff, especially when it comes to video. I've loved this all my life. I've loved creating. I've got some short videos that I created in my early 20s that I never want anyone to see. And I've created videos with my best friends, little parody videos, little scary movies that we made. And it took me 34 years. Like, it's something I realized just last year sitting down. And I remember saying this to you, Ali, is that, I love creating stuff when it comes to video. Maybe I'm a creator. And it took 34 years of trying to listen for me to really fully acknowledge that now in my life. And now that I've acknowledged that, I've built out a whole nother section to my studio where I'm going to start creating more content again. And it's so crazy that that it's that hard to listen to yourself. It's kind of, it's almost alarming to see that. For me, as someone who I feel like I try to go through life with lots of self-awareness, and I'm trying to be patient and I listen to myself, but even then it took me that long just to acknowledge that one part of myself. So crazy.
Yeah. I can't remember which book we reviewed, but we were talking about that. We have these things that we probably hide that are really aligned to us, but we don't.
Those shadow selves. Yeah, that's
the shadow selves, right? So yours might be, you're meant to be a film director or yeah, we'll do a Netflix show soon or something. I don't know. yeah. But we all have them. Like my one that I've always sat there putting it off is I love writing, but
yeah, you do.
Like I write so many journals and little stories and blogs and things that I haven't even really published, but it's just something that I've always just put off because I don't know.
I think you got to do it. I mean, you look at your past, Ali. You created that children's book with your wife for your kids. And how much you loved that experience. I mean, I know it was tough, that experience, because the illustrations and everything you had to do. It took a long time, but you're so proud of it. I really feel like just how I'm deep into the creation process of my online course at the moment. You've really got to start thinking about pushing yourself to publish something. You've got things that are 80% there already. Maybe it's a good goal for the end of 2021 to publish something.
Yeah, well, thanks for putting me a bit of public accountability. That's
good. Public accountability.
All right, within the next 5 years, I'll publish something.
5 years is too long. I gave you the time frame up to the end of this year. I think you really should push yourself, because another thing that you really liked, and if we're sitting here, listening to you, you love journaling. I mean, you've been trying to push that journal thing on me for, I don't know, the entire friendship, and I still haven't really sat down and journaled. It's because it's something that, I don't particularly love and enjoy. I love doing this. This is kind of a version of journaling for me, right? So I feel like you've got to give yourself that goal, because you love writing, you love putting thoughts to paper, you love doing that stuff. Yeah, what's a more realistic goal you can set? Public goal that you can set?
Yeah, well, I think, it's a cool call out. Thanks, bro. I think it's one of the things that, I'll look at doing.
End of 2021.
First draft by the end of 2021.
Yeah, that would be amazing. That would be amazing to have a first draft that you can print out and send to your top 10 friends and let them have a read.
There we go. All right, deal.
There we go. Done. Locked in. Well, look, as we kind of go through the value from this book, and the reason why we're doing this as a multi-episode as well is I've listened to this not this podcast, sorry. Yeah, I have listened to our own podcast as well. And if you haven't, you should listen to this podcast. It's great. But to me, I've listened to the Naval book, and I've read the Naval book as well. And I've listened to it multiple times because, again, I love this book so much because rarely have I come across someone who's successful and happy. A lot of the successful people that I read about, when you read about their lives, you start to notice, there were some broken parts, broken family, not very happy, some kind of abuse of some substance along the way. When people talk about them, they didn't particularly like that person because they're a bit of a wanker. But when I look at Naval, people love him. He seems to love his own life, and he's got this beautiful way about life. And that's why we're making this a multi-episode episode, because we just think it's such a valuable book. And I hope that people who are listening to this are enjoying it, because, man, I love this. I love this book.
Well said. Well said.
Well, look, and as we move forward, right, as we move forward through this book, because I do want to stay fairly close to the wisdom from this book, because, again, it has so much value. But another point that I wrote down was what Naval says. He goes, reading or learning is the ultimate meta skill and can be traded for anything else. It's funny because this podcast is so powerful in that it keeps me reading. Whereas we kind of went through that lull period where we didn't do any episodes, and I found myself not reading as much. And I love reading, but I also love studying it. And I think what we're doing here is we're kind of studying it with each other. We're kind of, presenting a piece of wisdom and then kind of, trying to massage it, pull it apart a little bit. And I really believe he's right when he says that, reading is a life skill, but you've got to read right. Don't read things you're not interested in. I think that was the trap that I fell for that made me dislike reading. School started that process. They made me read a whole bunch of books that I had no interest in as a mid-teen. I read Tuesdays with Maury as a 14-year-old kid, and I had no respect for that book. I'm like, why am I reading this depressing book? Well, yeah, I know, but at 13, I didn't care about that.
Not at 14.
At 14, I should have been reading Goosebumps. I should have been reading some of the books that were more appropriate for that younger age bracket, right? So I think the key here that I took away from this is read books that you enjoy, read books that you like. And then get the habit of reading going before you start to read books that are, things that you need to read, not want to read. Start with what you want, build the habit, and then gradually be able to then read the things you need to read.
Yeah. And I think timing with books is so important. Like you hit on it there.
But do you think that timing is real, or do you think that timing is kind of you making sense of it yourself? Because I've had that feeling as well, like, oh, this book came at the perfect time. Did it?
I think it is a little bit. Like,
okay.
Just because, say, for example, if you, I don't know, you've got a big, you're looking for a promotion at work and you're ready to go. If you then read a book about job interviewing at that time, or about negotiation, it's really important. Whereas if you just get given a list of books and someone's like, oh, you have to read these 10 books, but there's no real context for application, it's probably not going to seep into your memory. And that's where I think, like what you said just before, the reason why we get so much value out of the books that we speak about in this podcast is because we're reading them. Then we're really conscious about points and we're highlighting them. We're probably making notes. We're adding some of our own thoughts. We then know that we're going to be sharing this with other people and that we're going to be putting that out there into the world. So we get such a deeper level of understanding of that book. Like if I was just going to passively read this same book to get this level of understanding of it, I'd have to read it 4 or 5 different times. Whereas us doing this and then reading it, this book will probably stay pretty solidified within my knowledge base. And I think that's such an important part of reading, especially nonfiction, is can you apply some of those concepts, or can you use them to shape you in some way, or can you also then share that with somebody else in your life and synthesize that information that you've acquired as well? Because otherwise you're kind of just collecting information which you might not necessarily use.
To clarify what I meant before as well is that I thought you meant, when you just grab a book off a bookshelf and it serendipitously just kind of is the perfect time for your life.
Yeah.
But here's the point. I think that that's how I used to read. The way I used to read wasn't consciously reading a book that's relevant to my life, because if I read a book that's relevant to my life, naturally I'm going to be interested in it. Whereas before, the classic go to the airport, let's see what's in the top 10 books right now in the self-development section because I want to be successful. And then I'd go there and just pick one, and then I'd find myself just dozing off on page 4. Yeah. And I kind of consider myself someone who, I'm an astute reader. I can read. But the moment you give me a book that's not relevant to me,
you're out.
I can't read it. I just can't. I can't do it. It's boring. So to me, boring is probably defined by whether it's relevant to you or not. And
think about Netflix, for example. Do you ever recommend a show to somebody where you're like, oh, this show's going to be really hard for you to watch, but if you watch it, there's going to be some value in it? Well, it just never happens, right? Like the shows that we recommend are generally ones that are going to be entertaining. They're relevant. There's a good storyline. And I think that's the same with books is, there's some books that are really dense reads. But I think a lot of people just wear those books as badges of honor. It's like, I went and read Tolstoy, or Nietzsche, or like these philosophers. And then you start reading it. I think for most people, it's like, I could read this. It's going to take me 5 years to really understand it. I could probably listen to it as an audio book and then at least tick it off and say that I've read it. But do I understand the concepts? Was it relevant to me? Am I going to use any of it? So I think you're right that context is so important with reading and understanding what you want to do. But then I also love walking into the airport bookstore and then just seeing, is there a random book that just catches my eye, and give it a flick through while having a coffee or whatever it is while you're waiting for the flight. Who knows?
There's something really relaxing about that whole idea. But then every time I've done it so far, it's been a boring book. So
yeah. Or it goes the opposite way, and then you've now got this heavy book that you're lugging around with you on your travels that you know that you're never going to read, but you've got an obligation to read it.
And you know what's funny? In America, on the airlines, they rarely never check your baggage to see how heavy your backpack is. You know, I was carrying around backpacks that were like 10, 12 kilos, where the legal amount was only 7 kilos per person. Whereas in Australia, super strict. Every time I get on a flight, they're always like, look, we just want to quickly measure your bag. And so it's crazy. Well, there's a fact for you. Lucky you, Americans. And thank you, American Airline, for never checking my bags ever. Well, I mean, I bring that up simply again because I just wanted to connect that to the importance of, you know, being a perpetual learner. To be a perpetual learner, you know, we live in a world now where information is just abundant, right? Whereas if you look at the times, you know, the library of, is it called the Library of Alexandria or Alexander?
Yeah, Alexandria.
I mean, Alexandria. That's right. Yeah. Whatever there was, it was burnt down. So, you know, no one knows what it's called, really.
Between those three, we'll be right.
Between those three, we'll cover it.
Yeah.
But back in those days, the people who had access to that library were some of the most powerful people in the world, because knowledge at that time was power. Whereas to be able to find information now, it's so easy. Far out. If you want to learn how to code, you probably can learn yourself online at this point. If you want to learn complex physics, there's people teaching it on YouTube where you can just learn it at home right now. We've got access to all the knowledge we want in the world. We've got access to some of the best teachers in the world. So now it's not so much a lack of knowledge that's a problem. It's the lack of desire to learn. And that's why it's so important to align, you know, you should become a perpetual learner, but also pair that with become a perpetual learner in the areas that you're interested in, because that's going to be the best way for you to build the habit. And the crazy thing is, once you've built the habit, you can look at someone like Bill Gates, he'll take a stack of 7 or 8 books, lock himself away for a good week or two, and just read books on, you know, mental models or on the importance of, you know, the emissions that's destroying the world. And he can read through all those dense books because he's built the habit of reading and the habit of learning. So don't do it the other way around. Don't read books that you should read at the start. I think read books that you want to read at the start, and then gradually you can remedy it later once you've built the habit of going, oh, you know what? I really should read a book on relationships because I should get better at that. But only once you've built the habit. Don't do it before. Otherwise you'll burn yourself out, kind of like I did. Yeah.
And I think books are a bit like diminishing returns. If I've got a couple of 100 books sort of in this shelf just behind you, and I was looking at them the other day, and it was interesting how the first 3 to 5 that I would have read just gave me so much of the knowledge that I needed at that time. Like, they stand out so much more than, say, the next 100 or 200 or 300, because you do start getting diminishing returns. The ideas start repeating themselves, especially if you're reading on 6, 7 different topics. It's very hard to find new knowledge. So that whole concept of, if you want to learn, say, the skill of negotiation, for example, you probably only need to read 3 to 5 books. You don't need to read 30, 40, 50 of those books. Maybe if you want to get in the top like 0.01% of knowledge on that area, then go all the way. But there's such a beauty in just knowing that 5 to 10 hours of dedicated study on a topic probably gives you 80% of that knowledge. Nowadays, you can find it in a mixture of mediums too. You can get YouTube videos, you can get an Audible book, you can get a podcast, you can get a book. But it's blocking out the time and concentrated time that I think is a really important bit, because that's the bit that I always struggle with. You'll be reading a book for 20 minutes or 30 minutes, and then your brain will be like, we should get a snack. Or how about we watch an episode of Peaky Blinders instead? Like, that's easier. Like that.
It's true.
Nap on the couch. And that's what we're fighting now. It's not, like you said, it's not the access to the knowledge. It's convincing our brain that this is worthwhile for us to block out time and dig deep into it.
And I guess to add to that, another little hack that Naval says as well is, don't feel like you have to read the book from the start to the finish. from the right at the beginning to the end. The hack that he uses that makes himself makes him a better reader is that he'll read the chapters that are relevant to him and leave the other chapters alone. He'll pick up a book and go, look, if I need to learn negotiation right now, I need to learn about negotiations on how to buy a car, for example. And maybe the book has a chapter on how to negotiate to buy a car. Then just read that particular chapter. Don't worry about the other forms of negotiation just yet. Just kind of start where it's the most relevant to you, because then again, you're building that muscle and that habit of reading. And I loved that, because I always felt that some reason that obligation, no one's there telling me you have to finish the book, but I felt like in my head, must finish this book before I start the next. Whereas now I find myself having multiple books on my phone and my iPad. And when I feel inspired, I'll read the particular chapters that I feel most drawn to. This was one of the very few books that I read from beginning to end and beginning to end again and again, because I loved it so much. But again, it's because it's relevant to my life. Right now, I'm really focused on wealth creation, but then also I'm focused on being happy. And I used to think that, I need to get over wealth creation and just focus on being happy. But I've learned that, you can kind of do both. It's because I was starving myself of finding that joy and happiness. That's why I felt like I was getting sick of this game. But in actual fact, no, I like playing this game. I can actually kind of play both.
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, I love that. Yeah, I think and having multiple, see, I don't practice. I actually generally do read a book from start to finish. It annoys me too much knowing that it's, even if I skim it through or like go through it, I wish I could. So many people suggest that information, like just go dabble in, flick through them, read them. Unless the book's horrible, then I'll just throw it away. I'll delete it out of my brain pretty much. But most of the time I'm going to read it start to finish. But what I like doing is having multiple books going at the same time. I think that's something really cool, because that way you don't get blocked to a certain book. Because there is a real danger in that when you start reading something. I remember having the Walt Disney biography sitting on the shelf for ages, and that probably took me maybe a year to finally get through it. Thinking Fast and Slow was another book that everyone was like, this is an amazing book, you've got to read it. But I wanted to read it properly. So that was another one that took a while. Whereas sometimes I might just punch through 3 or 4 books that don't really matter just to get into that zone of learning in a week. But yeah, there's different ways of doing it. And I think find what works for you, but make a commitment to learning or reading something, at least if you can every day, if not minimum every week. Try to nourish your knowledge and your brain with some good information.
I've been throwing out a lot of topics so far. Is there one that I haven't covered that you'd like to cover? I know we're kind of following my notes as a basis, but I'd love to hear, is there something that stood out for you? And take a moment to see if you can find something too. I know it's very one-sided right now, but I'd love to hear from you too. Because the beauty of doing this, Ali, is that, like we often say offline, is that you'll bring up something that I didn't see. And I don't want to be missing out on that in this episode, because this was a book that I'd love to kind of hear your perspective on it too. Otherwise, I can throw another one out there, but I'd love to hear from you too.
Well, I like his thinkings on philosophy. So let's explore
like the meaning of life, etc.
Yeah, so he's got a few different ones there, and it's something that I've had an interest in as well for the last few years, just looking at different philosophies, and I think he really seems to like Stoicism as one of his philosophies. He likes rational Buddhism is one of the other ones that he mentions there as well. He looks at around like value, like exploring your values, and I think that's an interesting concept, just around developing one's philosophy and what that looks like. So I'd love to jam on that for a little bit. But
okay,
like where are you at? Like, what's your like? Do you subscribe to any teachings?
Look,
or philosophy?
my family are Buddhists. I consider myself a Buddhist, but I always had a little bit of a problem with it as well.
Yeah.
Because in Buddhism, and that's why I loved it when Naval said rational Buddhism, because for me, I love all the teachings in Buddhism. I love that, it teaches you to be kind, compassionate, be mindful, etc. But then they inevitably get to this whole thing about, your past life, and this life is a result of, the wrongdoings or the things you did well in that last life. So if you live a good past life, that's why you're living such a great life now. And like, I'm at that point where I'm just like, is it though? did we really have another life? Maybe we did. Who knows? Who am I to say that that wasn't true and that's actually the case? Just like how, in the Christian belief, they believe that you go to heaven. Who are you to say, how do you know you don't go to heaven? How do we know? No one actually truly knows, right? But I know that there's friction there for me. And there's this mystical stuff that sometimes they talk about. And I'm kind of like, And reading this made me go, wow, that's so cool. I didn't realize. I thought you had to, if you're a Buddhist, you have to take all of it. I didn't know there's a form of rational Buddhism.
Yeah.
So then that made me more open now to actually research Buddhism more. Whereas I always was stopped at the gates because I went, hey, I like what's behind the gate. I want to come in, but there's some kind of things, I'm not sure about it. Whereas now I find myself, I was at my dad's place on the weekend. And again, this book changed my life and even my relationship with my dad, because now I start asking my dad more about Buddhism. Because again, it's that whole philosophy of take some, not all. It's okay. So I love this. I think this whole idea of rational Buddhism, when I read it, actually started me on a more spiritual journey in my life. Whereas before I was kind of keeping it at arm's length a little. So I would say I'm a noob when it comes to this stuff. I'm very much so a noob.
Yeah, there's a line in the book as well. I think it's something along the lines of any value system or belief system that's fully packaged up, it's probably worth questioning that.
It's a cult. It's a cult.
Yeah, well, it makes sense, right? And I think that's why a lot of people have conflict with all religions. Again, it goes back to the same thing with diet. If there was one way to believe in something, or one religion that was the ultimate way to live life, everyone would do it. We would have all gotten together and been like, you know what? You guys really figured that out. Like, why don't we all, but there's so much ego and identity and tradition and all of these bits and pieces. And a lot of the times, I think the downside for a lot of religions is that they end up becoming corporations and power structures and organizations, and the actual essence of the teachings or the values that they're trying to impart can get lost, or they get changed by certain leaders and certain groups. So I think I'm a big fan of that as well. I think there's so much value. I love the concept of looking at books and stories and value systems that have been around for a very long period of time, like things that last 2,000 years, 3,000 years, that are based in philosophy or mental models that we use from back then. There's so much value. That's why I'm a pretty big fan of Stoicism. I don't fully subscribe to all of it. I think that you can get a little bit too detached when you go too far down the Stoic path. But if you're living a life that's very uncertain, or you're going through hardships, there's some amazing teachers in Stoicism. I think Taoism has, like Tao Te Ching's one of my favorite books, because it just looks at it feels like it's looking for the truth. I think in Buddhist teachings, there's some great examples there. I think, Christianity, there's amazing teachings. There's so many things there, but I love the idea of just picking parts from all of them and then trying to implement them. But I feel that there is something special in having an element of philosophical, I don't know, like a philosophical constitution, or using spirituality to help guide your own beliefs and your own values. And it can be very helpful, especially when the external world becomes too full on, to then detach from it a little bit.
Yeah. And I guess the rule that I like to use when I'm learning about philosophy and learning new ways of thinking or learning about mental models is, can I verify it, right?
Yeah.
Sure, my dad might, that's kind of embedded within a story, and I understand the lesson from it, and then I kind of go, can I verify that? Is that true for me? And I kind of take what I can verify, and if I can't verify it, then I usually pass on it. And again, it teaches me wonderful values. I try not to judge other people now based on their values that they may have. It's okay. That person's, again, got a different recipe for success for them, and I've got a different recipe myself as well. So it's kind of a good thing to keep in mind, that just make sure you can verify it. And if you can't verify it, it's okay. You can pass on it.
Yeah.
You can still be a part of that same tribe. It's just you're passing on a couple of those values. It's okay. A couple of those lessons. It's okay.
Yep. I think that's one of the greatest benefits in reading wider on philosophy and religion and all that, is that you just get to see everyone's perspective holistically, because so many times those belief systems are in such contradiction, right, between the other one. But the people from both of those religions have lived in the same villages at times, and they've lived in the same environment. And it's interesting just to see that in terms of the human experience, that what's black and white to one person can be grey to somebody else. And for me, it helped me with not making too many judgments on the way that people went about it. You know, when you see people acting or behaving in a certain way that might not fully align with the way that you act or align with your values, you can at least then have an appreciation and understanding of, all right, well, I understand why they're doing that and why that's happening. And it's very rarely like one is in the right and one is in the wrong. I just am yet to see that.
Who knows what is right and what is wrong ultimately?
That's
anyway,
right.
I mean, it's like scientists. I love scientists because no matter what you say to them, they go, "It's possible."
Yeah.
You know, they always use that same reply. It's like, look, it's possible. It's possible. It's possible. They never say something is impossible because they know in science that, again, nothing really is impossible. Everything is possible. We could be, again, we could be in in a simulation right now. That's possible. They say that's more likely than any other theory, and it's just, again, when you have that kind of open mind, you live a certain way. I feel like, I just want to acknowledge as well that I'm very new in this space. I'd love us to pick a philosophy book to dive into, because it's like when we did that review on Bruce Lee's book, for example.
Yeah.
That was such a difficult book for me to digest. I often, people often say to me as well, they often say, "Oh, hey, Vin, you seem very wise for someone who's in their mid-30s." And I go, "Oh, am I?" And then sometimes I fell into the trap of believing, "Oh, maybe I am pretty wise." Read that book, smash in the face. I remember telling you that when we did that podcast, I remember saying, "Ali, either my brain is broken or this book is rubbish." And then you're like, "Yeah, it's more likely your brain is broken, right?"
Not at all. I think you can be wise without understanding or like reading all of these books. So I think it shows that there's the other thing with wisdom, right? Like, I don't think you're wise just because you read a lot of books. Like, if people are actually telling you that you're wise, that means that you're sharing knowledge that's valuable to them. So maybe the book's stupid, my friend, and you are.
No, I highly doubt it. You're a very good friend, but yeah, I just don't think that's the case. But that's why I'd like to make
either.
Yeah, you really should, because he'll come back from the dead.
Bruce Lee.
And kick your ass.
Yeah, I love him.
Yeah. Okay, well, I mean, that's an interesting one. I think I would love to go on a bit more of a journey on that. I think philosophically, to learn more. I'd love to grow that side of me that's, more spiritual. And again, I just want to acknowledge as well that I did have a block. And the block was, I thought that, if you subscribe to a religion even, you have to subscribe to the entire thing. Whereas I love it. When I met my mother and father-in-law for the first time, and, we're meeting, we're talking, we're getting to know each other. And I remember asking them, I go, "Oh, my family are Buddhists. How about yourselves? Like, do you subscribe to a religion and everything?" And I remember my father-in-law's response. He was like, "We are free thinkers." Ooh. And I was like, "What the hell is a free thinker?" I was like, what do you mean by that? And he just goes, "Look, we allow ourselves to take a little bit from every religion because we think all religions are great." And I thought that was such a cool reply. I've never heard anyone say that, and so every time I meet them, it's just amazing. They're free thinkers. They allow themselves to be free in their thought. I thought that was beautiful. Well, look, there's a couple of topics here. You got the rational Buddhism. You brought something else up as well. You said the other one was about, happiness as well. I think that goes under this topic. I think, the meaning of life goes under this topic, right? It all kind of is captured by the realm of philosophy.
Yeah. Well, let's dig into happiness.
Let's do it. I'm just going to bring up my notes on it. Yep.
Cool.
Okay. Right. Gover, you can start this topic. You want me to kick it off?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, the thing that I got highlighted in the book here is that I highlighted, I think the most common mistake for humanity is believing you're going to be made happy because of some external circumstance. That is so true. I, for one, can say that I fall victim to this all the time. You know this about me. I want to get a Jeep and I want to buy a Jeep. And I can tell you now in my own mind that a Jeep Wrangler, to be specific. And I can tell you right now in my own mind, I keep telling myself that I'm not, when I get that Jeep, that's matte black with a rooftop tent on it as well, potentially a trailer behind it, because I'm going to build the ultimate camping kit out ever. That when I get this, I'm going to be so happy. I'm going to be so happy once I get this. And I truly fundamentally believe that right now, even though I just read that comment and I know Naval is right, I still believe that I'm going to be extremely happy when I get that external, that external material thing.
Well, here's a question. You only want the Jeep, like say right now, you seem pretty happy and it feels like you'd be pretty happy if you got the Jeep. Whereas, do you think more about the Jeep when you're sad? Is it an antidote to sadness, or would you actually just want the Jeep anyway, even when you're happy? Because then I think if you still want the Jeep when you're happy, then it's not like you're just getting the Jeep to fix something that isn't working in your life. There's a difference there, right? Because you might want the Jeep because you want to go camping or you want to spend time with your family. So there could be a danger in just being like, am I only getting the Jeep because I think it's because that's the difference, I think, is when we think that I'm really, really sad, I'm down right now, but if I earn this amount of money, I'll be happy, because that's where the trap potentially lies. Or I'm really angry, but if I had $5 million, I wouldn't be angry anymore. It's like, those are the things where I don't think the solution is the external fixing.
Well, let's keep jamming on my problem for a second, since this has become like a bit of a therapy session for me.
Let's do it.
Okay, if I really ask myself the question, when do I think about the Jeep? I think about the Jeep when I'm bored.
Yeah.
I think about the Jeep, I would say, a couple of times a week, regardless of whether I'm sad or happy. So that does kind of fit your analogy of, this is probably telling me that I should get the Jeep. But it's I think of it also because I want the Jeep so that I have an activity that I can start to build on with my son and my future children. Something that we can do as daddy and children time is that my wife likes camping. She's not a huge fan of it. Blah, blah, that's okay. You don't have to love everything I love. I still want to be an individual. So to me, but again, see, when I really think rationally about it, why do I need the Jeep? Why can't I just do that with my current SUV right now? Why do I need another car? What for? I can do it with the current SUV. I love the look of it. I love the aesthetics of it. I love what it represents, the ruggedness. I love the manly. Yeah, I love that. Man. Yeah, help me. What's wrong with me? I don't know, Ali. Tell me. What do I do? What do I need to do?
I'm obviously not a therapist, but I think the therapist doesn't actually say anything. They just sit there and let you talk, and then you figure out the answer. So you buying a Jeep or what?
Yeah. Well, just so everyone knows, Ali, for Christmas, he got me a little Lego Jeep that I still haven't put together. But thank you for that, Ali. It's very, very nice and thoughtful of you. But it's like,
maybe that's the rules. Once you put the Lego Jeep together, then you're one step closer to being allowed the.
No, but I don't want to fall victim to what again. The quote is, I think the most common mistake for humanity is believing you're going to be made happy because of some external circumstance. Like, if this is the most common mistake, if this is the illusion that people fall for, maybe this is something I need to think about with more depth. Do you really need this? Is it even a question of need or want? Is it? I just don't want to fall for that, because if I fall for that, guess what? I'll buy the Jeep. I'm going to want something else.
Well, one of the things and I don't know whether I agree with this or not, but one of the things he talks about is he talks a lot around desire being nearly one of the antidotes to happiness, right? And
wait, is it the antidote?
Oh, well, not really. I don't know.
I thought that he meant desire. I thought he talked about desire as, desire is you making a contract with yourself, saying that I won't be happy until I get that external thing.
Correct. So with
it's
that,
not so much an antidote. It's
not the antidote.
It takes away. It's a poison that robs you of happiness,
and potentially, right? But because that was one of the interesting ones when I was reading that is, well, again, it felt like you kind of need. look, I don't know if if you're not striving for anything or you don't have desire, because it's such a natural human emotion to want stuff and
Yeah.
to keep moving forward and to grow. Whereas I've battled that a little bit where it's like, all right, well, because I've had times where I've nearly gotten rid of material attachment and not having desire. But that also comes with like yeah, you feel pretty free and it's quite peaceful. But then it also gets a little bit boring too, in terms of, well, like I know some of the times where I've really been in the best flow states and energized is when there's been nearly like a fight, or you're in the middle of the game and there's some external outcome that you need to get. But then I've also been equally as engaged when I've been on a 2-week trip just meditating for the majority of the time. So I can't say that one's better than the other. I think if you do too much of either, for me personally, it becomes a little bit too much. Whereas like I could get sad when I'm meditating way too much, and I could get sad if I'm really striving for something too external, because the external thing will start feeling like a weight. And then if you're too zen or whatever you call it, it just starts being like, oh, well, now I'm getting, what's my purpose? What's the point of me even being here? Like, what am I doing right now? I've just been sitting here for 10 hours. Like,
Oh gosh.
So I don't know. I think it lies somewhere in the middle, maybe.
I think you're really right, because when I think about the people who kind of talk about the idea of happiness being letting go of everything and having no desire, and I feel like those people tend to be really, really successful in life and have a lot of abundance. And I think and then when you have a lot of abundance, and often when you do say that you're happy, a lot of the times when you're closer to that person, you realize they're still very human as well. Is that if they fully go too far one way, like you said, they're unhappy. But if you're that person who wants stuff all the time, then you're also unhappy. I really think you're right in that, even though in this book it kind of talks about how desire is that contract you make with yourself to be unhappy until you have that thing. I think there's a healthy way to desire things as well, where you can be happy on the way to achieving that thing. I don't think that desire has to necessarily be being unhappy until I have it. Maybe there is a way to desire something in a healthy way or maybe there isn't. Maybe you have to be unhappy because that pushes you to get the thing that you want. It's kind of like how I remember reading Jordan Peterson's book, The 12 Rules of Life, where he says that, there are a lot of schools of thoughts where they say, oh, you're fine the way you are. You should be happy with the way you are. And Jordan Peterson's classic way of doing it is, no, you're not. You shouldn't be fine with the way you are. You're disgusting. You should hate yourself right now. And sorry, that's my attempt at doing his voice. It was bloody terrible.
That's pretty close.
But he does have a pretty annoying voice. Yeah. But he's right in that if you are in a place where you really are unhappy and you don't like where you are, then you do need a bit of that unhappiness and discomfort to get yourself out of that situation. Whereas if you just accept all the time and become kind of that, I don't know what I was trying to be, like that kind of fairy, then you don't move. You're happily sitting on a nail and going, oh, it's fine. I'm meant to be here. Yeah. So I don't know. This is a weird one.
I love quantifying things, and I think that quantifying happiness has got to be one of the hardest things to do.
Oh yeah.
But it's so real because it's a feeling that we're all kind of searching for and that we want. But one of the things that I remember reflecting on a little while ago was thinking, all right, am I happier now? Like, can I categorically say that I'm happier now than I was 5 years ago? And I have a pretty good guess that I am, but there's no way for me to prove that. Like, how do I know? If I look back on, say, my camera roll and I have a look at things that I was doing 5 years ago, I'm like, that looked like a pretty fun year. Like what was in there was pretty fun, but it's so hard because you're just going off memories and comparison to a different time. Like, yeah, there must and you can start putting narratives around it as well. You can be like, oh yeah, like that was a amazing experience or whatever it is, because you have little highlights and I don't know, memories that come out of those. And you can start being like, oh, I think 2016 would have been my happiest year, but there's no real way to validate that.
It's hard to measure.
Yeah, it's really, really hard to measure. And I think that's one of the things that, yeah, sorry.
No, finish your thought before I go
Yeah.
with mine.
Yeah, I think it's just I think that's one of the bits that we all struggle with, is that sometimes we're searching for different feelings from the past. And I think Naval speaks about that in the book as well, where everyone says it. They're like, you've got to be in the present moment. You've got to stay somewhere close to where it is right now, because that's the only reality that you can live. But that is quite hard to practice, because as humans, we have the ability to project into the future, and we have the ability to look back into the past. But most people that speak about happiness, or even again, you go back to philosophy and the spiritual teachings, nearly all of them come back to be present, be present. Whereas, why is that? It is very difficult to be present. Like, I don't know many people that are fully present all the time. Or if they are, and they say they are, it kind of feels a bit awkward, like they're lying.
Yeah,
a
it doesn't
bit.
feel like the truth. Yeah, no, it's true. It's true. It's true.
Like a baby is present, or like a little kid.
Yes, that's what I was going to talk about.
Yeah.
I was going to talk
Really
about when you
old
look at a
people,
kid.
elderly people are very present. You
Oh,
can feel
some.
You think?
Nah, some are haunted by a life that
That's
they
true.
didn't live well, and then there's just kind
That's
of
true.
haunting them away. I think the majority
I'll
of them
pay that.
feel that. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think we like to think of old people as being this old, wise, nice person who's, relaxed and has lived a good life. But I think often what you'll find is they're just kind of living in a tormented state where they just, I should have done this. I should have said this. I shouldn't have ended that friendship. I shouldn't. Yeah. There's a lot of regret,
fair.
I think.
That's fair.
I think the example you gave that I really wanted to jump in and chime in on was the kids.
Yeah.
I mean, you look at your son. You were talking about in the first part of this video about how much he loved his time, and he goes, "Dad, why can't every day be like this?" You know, and Xander's the same thing. Like last night, I was playing with Xander. Xander just loves being physical, so throwing him around, and it's like, and he loves it. He's laughing till he's like his stomach is bursting, and I'm like, this kid is so happy right now, and he's so good at getting into this happiness state every day. There's a few little things that I know I can do, a few little things that he has to do, and we're in a happy state, right? Yeah. And then it makes me think that happiness, what I found really interesting about this book, and I will connect it back to happiness in a moment, but I found it really interesting when Naval said making money is actually a skill. It's a skill. Making money is a skill. And I went, I never thought about it like that. Same way as I never thought about happiness as being a skill. Whereas in this book as well, he says, happiness is a skill that you develop and a choice that you make. You choose to be happy, and then you work at it. And it's like, it's a choice, like, huh? Really? Maybe it's a choice to be present. Okay, cool. But then also that it's a skill. That fascinated me, because I'm someone who likes building skill. I'm someone who likes mastering something. Never thought of happiness as something you can master. Yeah. Next time you talk to me, I'm just going to be high as a kite.
You're gonna sit there with tears in your eyes, and you'll be like,
so happy
stressed out,
friend,
and you're just be like, dude, I'm just mastering happiness right now.
It's the best. Mastering being present right now. Yeah, but I think there's something really profound there in that. First of all, understanding that it's a choice. And I think you brought some light to the idea of being present. Kids are very present. But also, I think it's interesting. I mean, I just want to ask you, what do you think it means by when it says happiness is a choice you can make?
Yeah. I think it's just being conscious about it, right? Like if you do view it more like a skill and a feeling, then I guess ultimately we can all choose to be happy if we want to. Because I think there's another line in the book as well, is the emotions, like emotions that we feel, they're not usually objective. You know what I mean? Like you could sit there and have something really bad happen to you, and you could decide to laugh hysterically and probably trick yourself into thinking it's funny, right? Whereas the more natural response will probably be that you might cry, or you'll get angry, or something along those lines. But you know what I mean? There's so many different ways to choose how we react to situations and to things that are going on. And that's what I feel like that means, is that happiness is a choice. Like we can choose to be happy, but like I find myself doing it. There's just little things where it's like, well, some days why is there a little smile on my face? And then other days why is it like, You know, why is
Frown.
there a little frown? And that can be a conscious decision, right? Like you can sit there and just decide to just spend the day smiling, and it's not going to cost you anything. It's going to take a little bit of effort. So that's where it maybe becomes a choice. You can choose to be more energetic. You can choose to speak with more volume and energize the people around. You can choose to make jokes. You can choose to play and not take things too seriously. So, but
Yeah, I like that.
They're hard choices to make, and they're hard to practice. That's where maybe happiness becomes more of a practice. If those things do result into happiness.
I mean, Naval does say it, right? When he says that when there are two choices laid out in front of you, take the one that's more difficult. You know, it's easy to get angry at things. It's easy to get upset at someone when, you know, they text us a message that's really short and you go, wow, I took all this time to send you a really nice, lovely message. And all you wrote was, yeah, cheers, thanks, right? It's just, you can choose to look at that as, oh, you know, you can choose to look at it from a positive light. Maybe they're really busy that day, right? And so I think you're so right, is that it is a choice.
Yeah. Well, here's a question. What makes you, what throws you off if you're feeling pretty happy? What are some external things that might throw you off the happiness train?
When I get feedback that someone didn't like something that I did. So maybe I created something for a client and they might send me an email saying, hey, Vin, look, we got some feedback and we just thought we'd share it with you. And you know, you read it and you're like, oh, damn, I definitely didn't deliver on what I promised. Another one would be, I think when I feel negative vibes around me, when someone's just being mean or nasty, when someone's just been, and then, you know, sometimes how we joke around or we can be a little mean to each other. Like, to me, that's all done in good spirits. And I don't know if you go after that and cry in your bedroom or not, but I assume you don't.
I cry for the majority of the day. But that's fine. It's resilience training. Like I need to toughen up. I need to learn these things. It's cool.
But that's why it makes it funny for me, because if I know you cry for a day, I laugh extra hard.
Yeah, but you come harder the next time. Yeah,
yeah, exactly. I don't like the way that sounded, but that's fine.
No, that really was a bad sentence.
Yeah, that really was a bad sentence. That was bloody terrible.
And now that you've drawn attention to it, it's even worse. It's like...
Now I'm going to go and cry for a day because of how awkward you made me feel just now. Now I can't look you in the eyes anymore. But look, what I will mention is another thing. Or just when I'm in the presence of evil, or just like something that's just really sinister and dark, kind of like what you just made me feel just now.
What is this? I feel Harry Potter. Are you living? Do you live at like Hogwarts or something?
No, I'll give you the example. It's when I'm with someone who's very angry at someone and just wants to crush another person's world because of how much hatred they have for that person. When I'm in that kind of dark, sinister space, that really gets me down. Then I become very unhappy. I don't like being around that. Yeah. I don't like, to me, I just try to stay away from that. I'm trying to think of a couple of other things. Another thing I would say to you is, let's say, for example, my business is doing well. That's another one that usually gets me down and throws me off being happy. One last one for argument's sake is when I find out someone's sick in my family. If someone's sick, it throws me off fully. I get into this state of, fetal mode. Yeah.
Yep.
Why do you ask me that question?
No, because I think it's interesting to see what are the external things, because then, after that, it would be like, oh, well, what can we do to mitigate them? And then how do we go around them? Like for me, the things that throw me off are if I have to react to something. So because I value freedom and my time and all of those things, so if something pops up that's reactive in nature, that was unexpected, and it doesn't really align too much, like it's a problem that's popped up that I wouldn't have voluntarily chosen to solve or wanted to do in that moment at that time, it can then throw me off. It's really hard to then, I think for all of us, right, to then just park that and not have it circulating in the brain. Like I think that can happen a lot, if you're working from home and so you're spending a bit of time, or you're out in the weekend and you're with the kids, and then you get a message that says that, like what you said, that there's a problem with the business, that, and then you have to attack yourself or solve it, empty it. Like those things kind of throw me off a little bit. To me, another one is...
That's a really good point.
A little bit.
That's a really good point.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, keep going. Yeah.
Another one is just when my mind's too active, or it's too attached to my ego or identity, and I can feel it. Like it feels like time's going really fast, and life doesn't feel that like fluid or flowy, or there's nearly a little bit of fear-based type of thinking creeping in, and then getting through those. So a lot of mine is sort of around thought processes and internal dialogues that happen, and then just trying to observe them and let them pass.
This is why you often hear me say that I really feel like you're at a higher level of you're playing this happiness game at a higher level than me, because I'm still playing it from the sense of, oh, I'm happy. Oh, this thing knocked me off. Oh, that thing knocked me off. Oh, I want a Jeep. Oh yeah, do I want a Jeep? Maybe I want a Jeep. I don't know. Should I have a Jeep? Yeah, I should have a Jeep. I've worked hard for it. Oh, I'm happy again because I'm playing with my son. Oh, knocked off. I'm unhappy again. So I think is it really though? Because when I talk to you, often you're like, hey, I ask you, how's your day? And you say to me, oh, look, my breathing was off. So I'm not sure if I was in the happy state as well. I was like, it's like playing a different level. It's like Tiger Woods versus me. I really feel that. I feel inferior.
Nah, not at all. Just can't afford a Jeep. If I could afford a Jeep, I'd go get one.
I'm talking secondhand here, so it's not too bad. But
that Lego Jeep I got you was like my entire life savings. You haven't even built it yet.
No, I will build it. I'll build it when I get the Jeep. That's when I'll build it. All right. And I'll take a photo of that little Jeep next to my actual Jeep, and I'll do that for you. But look, I mean,
that's like that's Kaiser Sose stuff. It's like the Jeep's inside the Jeep. It's wow.
Inception.
Deeper meanings. Yeah, Inception.
Well, but I think what you said there before, if we connect what we're saying together, is that, when you have those things that knock you off, for you, maybe it'd be the breathing or the flow state. For me, maybe it's more shallow things like, someone being ill, or no, that's not shallow. That's
shallow.
Yeah, that's not shallow. What the hell am I talking about? I'm just trying to increase your superiority and make myself more inferior.
I think you just tried to increase your superiority there by saying that. Yeah, like mine's about breathing. Yours is about caring about other people.
Your family, they're selfish bastard.
Yeah, their life and their health.
You're worrying about your inability to take in an extra 2% of oxygen, and I'm worrying about someone's well-being.
You just made my existence just feel so pointless. Thanks.
Well, I think as the listeners listen to
this, day.
Well, you should for 2 days now, because I think the listeners now realize that you're just a monster.
Just breathing.
That's what you are.
Just quietly need to go breathe for the next 8 hours.
Yeah. After you finish this, you go put your horns back on and resume taking care of hell. So there you go. But what I was getting at was the following: is that where happiness becomes a skill is that you got to learn how to get back to that state of happiness when you get knocked off, right? So for example, something that I've learned to do more now, I'm still pretty bad at it, is that when I get knocked off and I'm not happy, like for example, my dad had a really big major health scare. This was just a few months ago, and that knocked me off for days. Before I sat down and talked to Pei Wen about it, and she was like, hey, well, look, I know you can't help. We just got to wait for the doctor results. And my dad's okay, so thank goodness. But it's just, for days I felt really shitty until Pei Wen said, hey, look, why don't you just focus on the things you can control, which is stoicism here, right? Stoicism is focus on the things you can control. You can control 2 things at a very high level. It's your thoughts and your actions. So she goes, what can you control with your thoughts? Why don't you start to think about the things you're grateful for? Xander's healthy. He's a happy little boy. I'm healthy, and the people around you are healthy as well. But right now, sure, one person's not in the greatest of health, but look at all the other people who have great health. And that helped a lot, because the moment I started to think about things I was grateful for, boom, it kind of snapped me out of that terrible state and into a better state. I think it's a skill in that you've got to have little tools that you have at your disposal when you fall off that happiness bandwagon, and try to minimize the time it takes for you to execute those strategies that help you feel better. What's some of the strategies you have? Yeah.
Well, just first of all, the more that we talk about this, the more that this is like one of my big takeaways off this is that, sometimes I'd get torn I'd always feel a bit weird speaking about happiness and happiness being a pursuit because it just felt so abstract. It's like, well, how do you quantify it? Like, things like freedom and happiness, like when they're achieved, how do you quantify them? Whereas now when we're digging into this, it's starting to feel like, oh, well, I think happiness is an attainable goal, and it's a skill, and there are probably tools that we can do, like exactly what you just mentioned there, what Pei Wen told you. Like, how cool is that? Because you could have spent another 7 days or however long just in a mental loop, sitting there feeling sorry for yourself, thinking of regrets, worrying about things that you can't control, things that it doesn't really change anything, right? Like you ultimately your dad will be going through his experience. Like you being super upset about that isn't going to help him realistically. Like when you look at it in that practical sense, but our
probably makes it worse.
Yeah, well, but that's our natural tendency though, is to fully internalize it, and we nearly feel like if we're showing heaps of pain, it's going to help the other person. But I just love like the two tools that Pei Wen gave you in that instance. It's like, well, what can you be grateful for, and just changing perspective. Like it's amazing how much of a pattern breaker perspective can be.
Yeah, far out.
And it is really difficult. Like it's really tough when people are like, oh, when you're really hurt or you're experiencing pain and you're pissed off, and people are like, oh, well, why don't you make a list of 5 things that you're grateful for? It nearly feels patronizing when you're in that emotional state because you're like,
don't tell me what to
do. Yeah, because that's what your brain wants to do, right? It's enjoying that feeling of nearly feeling sad and feeling like sorry for itself, and the ego kind of does like that, and maybe they are natural emotions that we have to work through, but then at some point proactiveness has to happen, right? There has to be some closure to that loop. You can't just live in that, because then you're going to be probably not of much use to everyone else around you in that in that environment. And I think people really also admire, and like in every family there's that person, like when something bad happens or there's a tragedy, there's that one person that everyone goes to. It's usually like there's a matriarch, there's like a grandma in the family, or there's someone, and usually their skill set is that they put stuff into perspective. Like they've got that position within the family or the tribe or the business or whatever it is, because they're usually the person that's just a little bit more level-headed, a little bit more not detached, but they can see it a bit more for what it is, and they can help guide others through what they're feeling and making them feel like, oh, it'll be okay, like this will pass. You need to do a couple of these things, or maybe share a few stories to provide context. And I think that really helps people with grieving and overcoming very big challenges, and can again be another tool to use for happiness.
What's interesting as you say that is, as I reflect, I'm that person in my family for a lot of my family members, including as my friends. But what's interesting is, even though it's so easy for me to give other people perspective and context, and get them share stories to comfort them, etc., that when it comes to these terrible things happening to me, I fall victim to that same thinking that they do. So just because they come to me and I seem like the person who has it all together, when shit goes wrong, I still fall apart, and I still need those tools to get me back on track.
Oh.
So I think having that toolkit really clear in the forefront of your mind is so important. Whether it's the gratitude exercise, whether it's, changing of environment for me is a big one too. And this is trying to be a bit more pragmatic to share with people a couple of tools, right? For me, it's the perspective change, like my wife always reminds me. I seem to always forget that one. A change of environment is really important for me. A change of auditory surroundings, like sound. I need to listen to some happy music. Because the thing that you want to do is you want to listen to sad music and then further wallow in that terrible kind of spiral and keep spiraling down. Whereas to me, I change music. I literally will tell Siri to play the All Out 60s playlist on Spotify. And if you haven't checked it out, check out All Out 60s on Spotify. Check it out. Thank me later. But it's such a happy playlist.
Yeah.
And I now understand that, again, it is a skill, because what I do, Ali, is in the mornings, when I wake up in the morning and I'm trying to get Pei Wen and Xander out of bed, they hate when I do this, but they love it once it's done, is I play the All Out 60s playlist.
Yeah.
Instead of hearing and I get my Google Home to play the All Out 60s playlist. And Every time I do this, Pei Wen at the start doesn't like it, but within 2 minutes in, she's singing the song and she's mouthing it and she's moving around, kind of dancing, right? And Xander's the same. Is that I think there are things we can pragmatically do to get ourselves into that state, which leads me to the point in the book where Naval says that I believe that happiness is really a default state. Happiness is there when you remove the sense of something is missing in my life. And again, that goes back to the quote from above that I think the most common mistake for humanity is believing you're going to be made happy because of some external circumstance. So you connect those two together. That means that if happiness is a default state, and the reason why I think there's legs to this is because that's why kids are happy, because they're normally living in their default state. They don't know to desire things. They don't know to want things really. I mean, sure, there may be a toy here or there, but generally they're in a fairly default state of mind, aren't they?
Well, kids don't overthink anything. That's probably their greatest advantage.
There's another skill. Don't overthink.
Yeah. Well, I think they're present. I don't know if kids are always happy. Like, I think kids can also be sad, but they just work through their gamut of emotions at a much more rapid pace. You know, like a kid won't sit there whereas we'll sit there and we'll worry about something for 5 days. A kid should be over it maybe in half an hour. Or like 10 minutes. Once you pass the toy, it's like, oh, what's the next thing? Oh, there's a balloon. Like, let's go play with that. And there's this, whereas we have an amazing ability to really harp on things. And we can sit there, like all of us, we can sit there with a mental loop on one topic. And it could sit there for 12 hours, 72 hours. Like,
sometimes years, brother.
Yeah. And you sit there and I think that's where the deloading phase, so using things like talking, or journaling, where you really break it down. Like, so many times I've sat there and I'll have something in my head for like 3 hours or 4 hours, and then I'll speak to a friend of mine or I'll chat to you, and not a friend, obviously, because you're very mean, but no.
Clearly not your friend, Ali.
We're only doing this because we're contractually obliged by no one.
Exactly.
We're not being paid.
By no one. Oh, I love you. That'd be crazy.
But we'll sit there and like it'll feel like there's this thing that's really unsolvable. Have a chat for like 5-10 minutes. A little bit of perspective will be put in, and then you're like, oh yeah, it's actually really simple. Like, I just need to take one action, or I just need to look at it from a different thing.
What you just said is a skill that you can develop, and the skill that I'm just going to zone in on right here is the skill of asking for help. Asking for that different perspective. So when you're sad, you've got to realize that the skill to becoming happy and getting out of that state is reaching out to a friend, going, hey, I feel this right now. And the friend who listens and then just shares a bit of perspective, or starts to share a story, or maybe helps you get out of that mode by taking you for a game of golf. That's a skill.
Reading a book, like the amount of times you can solve a problem just from reading, and then you'll get an idea or some nugget, because your brain's looking for a solution anyway. It's just, if you're in a mental loop, you're probably not going to unlock what that solution is, because your brain also is secretly enjoying the activity of being in the mental loop. And I think that's a really important part around detaching yourself from your thought processes and being, in a lot of teachings, they talk about being the observer and observing that your thoughts are just passing and, acknowledging them, waving to them, saying goodbye to them, writing them down, and then getting them out there, because a lot of the times, they're real, but they probably don't deserve the amount of attention and energy that we're allowing them. And I'm pretty sensitive to that nowadays, where I feel it. And it's like little things. It's like, oh, well, can't notice any birds, or you don't notice any sounds. Like, when you're really in that zone, everything's kind of blocked out because the mental loop's just so strong. And I think it's really hard to be happy if you're in that space. And we're seeing that nowadays. I think when, so many people are experiencing things like anxiety, and like, it feels like anxiety is one of those things that's just becoming a real increased part of our society, where people are getting medicated for it. And it's like, and it ends up causing pretty significant, like, physical, it has physical results. It's not just mental as well. It starts snowballing and getting bigger and bigger. And I think that's where, I'm not sure if there's antidotes to it, or the preventative steps for it is probably, it could be things like healthy diet and meditation and journaling or talking or being more present.
Well, that's the thing. Again, I think it's the skill of being happy. I more than ever, I mean, in the last hour, us talking about this, more than ever, have I started to gain some clarity about happiness. In that, I was feeling pretty overwhelmed. This was maybe about a month ago, and I had to deliver a very large project for a client of mine. And then a skill of happiness there for me was I scheduled in a break right afterwards. And I went to Melbourne, and that's where we caught up, right?
Yeah.
And that was such a powerful move for me, and I didn't realize that was a skill. And like I've already booked in another break for myself and the family. We're going to New Zealand for a couple of weeks to do a road trip, but I never had that skill before because I just kind of powered through everything. I powered through everything. You remember the podcast we did with Brene Brown? Is that my gear was Brene's gear back then before she learned about the importance of rest? Was that just power on, power on, power on? And then, see, isn't this so cool? We're drawing on the wisdom of so many different people. I love this. I love how it's all kind of coming together. But to me, that's a skill, Ali. Like I have to book those things in. And then I'm happier as a result.
Yep.
So to me, you've got to look at happiness really as a skill. I think that's, and everything we're talking about here are little things you can do to skillfully get yourself into a state of happiness more often. And I don't think it's a state that you can always be in as well. I think, like you mentioned at the beginning of this topic, is that if you're always happy, that then loses its value after a while. It's like the idea of exercise. It's why we need moments of struggle, is so that afterwards it feels better. We need dark so that there's light. We need light so that there's dark, right? It's a continuum, right? It's not just constant.
And to me nowadays, happiness is like, did I enjoy the day? Like I just break it down into days nearly. It's like, was today a good day? And could it have been, did I learn anything from it? Could I have done a couple of things better? Was there some moments there of enjoyment of, and I think it's getting really aware of what it is that makes you happy or elicits those good feelings inside yourself that you can do more consistently. Like for some people, it might be having 20 minutes to read. For some people, it might be, going for a coffee. For some, it might be doing a class or going to the gym, whatever it is. But try to integrate that. You give yourself at least some time during the day, every day, where you've got it blocked out, where you've got a chance for some happiness. And then the skill is around, can you integrate more and more of that into your day? So instead of it just being half an hour of happiness or an hour of happiness, can you get it up to 3 hours or 5 hours or 8 hours? But also be mindful of not getting into the trap where your expectation is that, I didn't feel any happiness today, so it's a write-off, because then it can start causing the other side, which will be like stress around wanting to be happy. So it's just being mindful of that. But I think being fluid and open to opportunities, or being more conscious about happiness as the pursuit, opposed to maybe other things, could be a cool operating system and a little mental model.
Well, here's the test of knowledge and application of knowledge right here. How does this all apply to me wanting a Jeep?
Oh, all right.
How does it apply, right? Because let's again, I want to remind you of the quote that Naval says here again. I believe that happiness is a default state. Happiness is when you remove the sense of something is missing in your life. I really feel like there's a lot of wisdom there, because when you feel like something's missing from your life, that's when you feel unhappy. I don't have the partner that I really want, or I don't have the car that I really want. I don't have the body that I really want. And when you feel like something is truly missing, and again, I'm not saying this lightly, because for some people, they really want to have a certain physique. For some people, they really desperately need to have this car, otherwise I'm not happy. For me, it's the Jeep. And for some, it might be a partner, a loved one, or a friend, whatever it may be. I really believe that if you can become skillful enough to somehow lessen that need, you start to lessen the feeling of, I'm missing something, then I think that is a really big key to happiness. I really think he's onto something there.
Yeah. Yep. And maybe you could use that experience in a few different ways. Like you could use it in terms of, all right, you could go from, I'm just not going to get the Jeep, and then see if, can you be happy without the Jeep? You could.
I don't think so.
you could get the Jeep But then you could be like, oh, I'm going to sell the Jeep in 3 months' time if I don't use it X number of times because it didn't bring me the happiness, or it just became like an attachment. You know, like, let's say there's different ways that you could potentially play it. You could reward yourself with the Jeep if you reach another goal that's aligned with who you are. Like there's so many options there. You could trade it. So you could be like, all right, well, if I've got the other car, we have to get rid of something else to get the Jeep. So then it doesn't feel like it's just an accumulation of things.
Well, I can give you another example. And this is all helping, by the way. Thank you for sharing your thoughts. But I can give you another example, and that's with clothing, right? I used to be someone who buys clothes all the time. And then Paywen kind of brought it to my attention. And it's true. I used to think, oh, if I buy that and I wear it and it looks good, I'm going to feel really good. You know, I haven't bought clothes in over a year. And I kind of, done that for 12 months, buying no clothes. And it felt great because then I no longer had that cognitive capacity in my brain taken away going, every time we go shopping, oh, I want this, I want that, I want that, I want that. I just didn't think about it because I'm like, I'm not going to buy anything. And then I allow myself like a small budget of $500-600 now a year where I'm allowed to spend that to buy clothes. And outside of that, that's it. You're not allowed to buy any more clothes. So, I mean, I've been able to do it successfully with clothing. It's just that, I still feel like I like the ideas you're coming up with, and I'd love to hear more if you've got it. But it's weird with this Jeep thing. I'm like, oh, I still really want it despite what you say. I just like, ugh.
Yeah, well, it's also maybe seeing is there opportunities to test what's the opposite to your normal operating approach and then just experimenting with it. Like I remember the first time I threw out I think I read the Magic Art of Tidying Up, Marie Kondo, this book maybe 4 or 5 years ago, and I threw out 80% of my clothes. And
wow.
That was like one of the coolest experiences of detachment, because you're sitting there and you realize the cognitive weight of having these things that you've got that you're like, oh, well, I spent $100 on that jumper, but I've only worn it once, so I can't throw it out. I can't donate it. But then when you actually get rid of it all, it's like a whole weight is removed from your shoulders. Now, I probably got rid of too many clothes because then I was running out of t-shirts. I had to buy back some of the things, and but it was awesome because then I got to get new stuff. I wasn't just holding on to things that were like a 6 out of 10 just because I had them. I was actually then picking new things and I'm like, oh, this is actually awesome. I really like this item. And to me, with things, that's how I approach things. It's if I own things, it's just got to be a real peak experience with the thing. Like I don't believe in it just being binary, that we don't buy anything just because I'm practicing not buying stuff. Like if there's something that really aligns or resonates and it's within my value set, then I'll get it, and sometimes there'll be aspects of the things that I buy that will seem indulgent. Like at the moment, I've got heaps of Lego, but I love building Lego. Like I get to use my hands. It's meditative. I'll think about little strategies. I'll write notes. I'll read a book while I'm building Lego. So to me, it's ticking a lot of different boxes that align. Whereas my wife's probably looking at it like, why the hell do you have 20 sets of Lego? Like, why is that something that you're spending so much, money on? Whereas that's something that I'll go heavy on, but then there'll be other things where I'm like, I'm just not going to allocate money to that just because I need to buy it, or everyone else has got one, or it just feels like that's the buzz product. So long story short is, I think, have a look at all the stuff that you've got and then get rid of the stuff that you're not actually using or that you don't love or doesn't really align.
Make room for the things that you want.
And then make room for the things that you want, so that
maybe that's a part of it, Ali. I think that's really wise.
It could be that, because I hate it when things feel like there's a burden attached to them, like there's a weight to it. So that's just one of my values, is I'll try to avoid buying things that I feel that I'm obliged to, or that I bought just for the sake of it, or it's something bigger that like I don't really want the responsibility for that thing. That's something that I'll personally avoid, but then I'll probably buy things and not really hesitate too much if they are something that really aligns with where I'm at, what I'm doing at the moment.
Well, this idea comes from the book Essentialism, right? Where it talks about the whole concept of the less things you have, the more the things that you do have serve you. It's the whole kind of philosophy behind minimalism. Yep. And what you kind of shared with me just now, if I use the same analogy and let's say the Jeep was a piece of clothing, I think the reason I feel hesitant for the Jeep is because I need to get rid of stuff before I
Yeah.
bring in more stuff into my life. I think right now there's too much stuff in my life, which makes me feel clutter. And if I want more things, then I have to get rid of things. I think it's a process of breathing in and breathing out. You can't just continually breathe in. You're just going to explode, right? Maybe I need to go through a process of decluttering, getting rid of some stuff. And then I'll feel like there's more room in my life for this. But then I also thought combined with that as well, and this is just me justifying myself, a good reason for me to get the Jeep, but to me, it's going to act as a tool for me to be able to be happier as well. Because to me, the Jeep symbolizes a form of escapism. It's that I can see myself, once a fortnight, once a week, if I can, just taking the car, myself, Lenny, taking his kid out. We both just go for a quick camping trip overnight. And to have something like that at my disposal, it just allows me it's a form of escapism. Yeah, I mean, thanks for letting me kind of taking that as a bit of a test run and then playing with it. But I think I've got a little bit of clarity with it now, which is cool.
And I think with things, one of the aspects that stops us from buying things is when it makes us feel a certain way. Like, does this feel indulgent, or does this feel like undeserved, or does this, like when it comes with those feelings, there's something that we have to then work through as well. And sometimes it just can be a timing thing. And I really like the idea that you just said there. Whereas obviously right now, there's something holding you back. Like you're close and you want it, but there's something that you need to do internally that makes you feel like, well, now it's time and now it's ready. Or, it might even just be something simple like, oh, where am I going to park it? Or am I going to be worried about the security? So you have to then work.
No, I think you mentioned this to me a while ago, but I've just got to pair it with another form of achievement. I often feel that feeling of I don't deserve something. I feel that often. And I find that I can remedy that best when I pair it with some form of achievement. And when I form it with some form of achievement, I can go, oh yeah, that's cool. I can justify it in my own mind. I kind of play off the reward system a lot, and I think that works for me. Yeah. Okay. Perfect. Well, I think we've spent enough time on that, and I think people are probably getting bored of that and just buy the damn Jeep, you idiot. Far out.
Somebody
waste an hour of our lives.
Sponsor you. There'll be somebody from Jeep listening to this.
I hope so. I'll send this episode and this snippet to Jeep and see what they think. Us and our 40 listeners, maybe they'll go, oh, it's worth it. Maybe all 40 of them will buy a Jeep and give Vinh a Jeep and Ali a Jeep. All right. Well, look, I think the last one we can end this book on, which is it's kind of sad because I feel like it deserves even a third episode, but I don't want to drag it on too long. But also I don't want to talk about everything. I want people to pick up this book and read it as well. And just quickly to mention here too, you can get this book for free. That's the coolest thing about Naval, is that you can pick up this book for free. You can get it for free on Naval's site, or you can get it for free on Spotify. Just search Naval Ravikant, his Almanack, and then you will come up with a podcast list of the person who kind of reads this book out and narrates it. Check it out. It's free. It's available. There's no reason you shouldn't be able to get this book. And the last one that I wanted to talk about was The Meaning of Life. Look at that. That's a bloody heavy one.
Save the easy one for last.
Yeah, we can knock this out in 30 seconds, darling.
Let's just end on that sentence. Like, yeah, that's it. No one's done.
The meaning of life is and gone.
Yeah, it's like, sorry, my internet.
Well, it is actually quite simple when he puts it out in the book. And I mean, I have one line that's highlighted and the others are kind of underlined, but the one that I highlighted was the meaning of life. You have to create your own meaning.
Beautiful.
I mean, we kind of did save the most simplest for last, and I think that's really it. Don't get so caught up in what, you have to live by somebody else's meaning or you're going to discover this meaning. Is that, no, it's not about, it's not even really about discovery of meaning. I think it's about creating meaning. Whereas I think sometimes when you get stuck in the mindset of thinking, I'm going to discover the meaning of life, and then you're searching all the time for it, that's the wrong way to think about it. I think that key word of discover or create, you've got to make that distinction. It's not about discovering the meaning of life. It's about creating the meaning of life for you.
I think that's something that I've really been learning a lot about recently, is that this life experience that we're given, and there might be other worlds, there might be future lives or past lives and all of that, but I agree with you. I haven't experienced that, so I don't know consciously what that means. So I can't really use that as my operating system. But while I am here, it just feels like, yeah, this experience, it's our movie. We get to write it. It's our video game. We're the character. We're the only character that you can play. And it's up to us to then decide, well, who do we want that to be? And how does that then impact the external world around us? And I think for me, that's the bit that I can sit easiest with. It's like, all right, well, I'll try to do the best version of what I am. And then hopefully that will be a positive force for others around. Sometimes it will, sometimes it won't, but I can live with that. It's like, it's just, well, as long as, yeah, it goes back to authenticity, right? Like if you can be the most authentic version of yourself, then you've kind of left it all out on the table. There shouldn't be too many regrets, good or bad. That's kind of my perspective on the meaning of life.
Oh, dude, I love it. I love that's how we're ending as well. And I'm just going to take one of the things you said and just want to tie a bolt on it for everyone as well. And it's that,
beautiful.
You know, you are the author of this story. You are the one that holds the pen. Maybe you've accidentally given that pen to somebody else to hold for a while. Maybe it's your parents, maybe it's your partner. It's about realizing that you can take that pen back at a moment's notice. So take the pen back, write your story. If you're happy with this chapter, end it, start a new chapter, write a completely new story. But at the end of the day, you're the author. So write the story. Thanks everyone for joining us for this 2-part episode on Naval's book. And we hope you enjoyed it. And if you did enjoy it, please do consider leaving us a rating. We'd love to get more than 5 downloads. And if you do want to follow us on social media, my tag is @AskVin. Ali, what's yours?
Just search Ali Tarai and some stuff should come up.
Thanks everyone. Thanks for joining us for this episode. We'll see you again soon. Bye.